March 6, 2024, News Report 1. CNN reports that Republican presidential candidate Haki announced at 10 a.m. on March 6 in South Carolina that he would suspend his campaign. Haki stated that it was time to suspend the campaign and congratulated Trump, but did not express support for him. He emphasized continuing to advocate conservative domestic and foreign policies, warning against isolationism and lack of fiscal discipline. Haki's decision to withdraw was due to his poor performance on Super Tuesday, March 5, where he only won one state, Vermont, out of the 15 states. So far, Haki has only won 2 states in the primaries, the other being the District of Columbia. Haki was the first and last Republican to challenge Trump. When attacked, he showed a firm attitude. Haki's campaign team issued a statement on the evening of March 5, stating that many Republican voters still expressed concern about Trump, believing that this did not contribute to the unity needed for Republican success. In addition, on Super Tuesday, March 5, Democratic and Republican primaries were held in 15 states, including Virginia and American Samoa. In the Democratic primaries, Biden won 15 states, losing only American Samoa. In the Republican primaries, Trump won 14 states, and Haki won Vermont. The results of American Samoa have not yet been announced. It is estimated that Biden will lock in the Democratic presidential nomination as early as March 19, while Trump will lock in the Republican presidential nomination as early as March 12, needing enough party nomination votes and delegate support. News Report 2. The chairman of the House Committee on Communist Strategy, Gallagher, and 17 other members proposed a bill on March 5 requiring TikTok to be divested from its parent company ByteDance within 165 days after the bill is passed, otherwise TikTok will not be able to be listed on Apple and Google and other app stores. The bill stipulates that if TikTok fails to separate from ByteDance within the specified time, then TikTok's listing on Apple, Google, and other companies' app stores will be illegal. The bill also authorizes the U.S. president to take action against social media applications from China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. TikTok has 170 million users in the United States. Gallagher said the bill sends a message to TikTok to either sever ties with the CCP or lose American users. The White House welcomed the bill, believing that if passed, it would deal a major blow to TikTok. News Report 3. Reuters reported that the EU will register Chinese electric vehicles for customs in a few days in preparation for taxation. Last October, the EU launched an anti-subsidy investigation into Chinese electric vehicles. On March 5, the EU released documents stating that there is sufficient evidence that Chinese electric vehicles have received government subsidies. The EU's anti-subsidy investigation into Chinese electric vehicles will end in November, but it is likely to start imposing provisional tariffs early. The provisional tariff will be calculated from the date of customs registration. Since the EU launched the anti-subsidy investigation into Chinese electric vehicles in October last year, the number of Chinese electric vehicles imported into the EU has increased by 14% year-on-year. The European Commission stated that if Chinese electric vehicles continue to enter the EU at an accelerated rate before the investigation ends, the damage to EU producers will be difficult to remedy. In addition, BYD announced on March 6 that it has started construction of a factory in Brazil and is expected to start production at the end of this year or early next year. The annual production capacity is expected to be 150,000 vehicles, initially producing models such as Dolphin Guard, Dolphin Mini, Song Plus SUV, and Yuan Plus crossover. News Report 4. Reuters reported that Chinese domestic investors are rapidly flocking to funds that invest in overseas assets, reaching the limit set by the Chinese government for overseas investment. Data from the China Securities Investment Fund Industry Association shows that the industry's size has increased by 19% year-on-year. QDII funds allow the purchase of overseas securities, and overseas assets have become an important channel for Chinese investors to invest overseas. a QDI product sold in China, is investing in the UK hedge fund Baillie Gifford Investment. This year, the financing amount of the product increased fivefold, raising $12 million, compared with only $2.1 million raised last year. In recent weeks, ETFs tracking the Nikkei average and the Nasdaq Composite Index have shown the risk of premiums, with buyers willing to pay prices higher than the asset price. Sources said that this year, Chinese investors' demand for QDI funds is crazy. However, due to the quota restrictions of the State Administration of Foreign Exchange, QDI funds are restricted, and the State Administration of Foreign Exchange has not allocated new quotas since July last year. Standard Chartered Bank recently stopped Chinese customers from investing in QDI products, possibly because their quotas have been used up. Huaxia Fund has set a daily subscription limit of 2,000 renminbi for its QDI products, while Hongli Fund's QDI product has a daily subscription limit of 300. These situations indicate that Chinese investors are crazily investing in overseas securities, while the sales of domestic stock-type mutual funds in China decreased by 35% in January. Currently, the Chinese stock market is approaching its lowest level in 5 years, and the 30-year yield of Chinese bonds has fallen to a historic low. News Report 5. Radio France Internationale reported that the EU and Canadian missions in Hong Kong recently issued diplomatic summons to the Hong Kong government, opposing the enactment of Article 23 of the Basic Law in Hong Kong. A diplomatic summons is a formal diplomatic means used to express strong opinions between governments on individual events. The EU criticized in the diplomatic summons that the legislation of Article 23 of the Basic Law defines state secrets broadly, the clause on foreign interference has far-reaching implications, and the definition of extraterritorial jurisdiction is vague. Once enacted, it will further erode the basic freedoms of Hong Kong citizens. The Canadian Consulate General in Hong Kong and Macau requested in a diplomatic summons that the Hong Kong government abide by the commitments of the Basic Law and international treaties, guarantee human rights and freedoms, and establish an independent mechanism to ensure transparency, proportionality, and accountability. Previously, the U.S. State Department and British Foreign Secretary Cameron issued statements opposing the legislation of Article 23 of the Basic Law in Hong Kong. However, faced with external criticism, the Hong Kong government accelerated the legislative process, planning to complete the legislation before the National Security Education Day on April 15. To this end, the chief executive of Hong Kong and legislators returned to Hong Kong midway from the 2 sessions on March 5 to participate in a joint meeting on March 6 to discuss the results of the public consultation on the legislation of Article 23 of the Basic Law. China's strategy is to complete the legislation of Article 23 of the Basic Law as soon as possible during the U.S. election period, taking advantage of the busy time of the U.S. government. The Hong Kong Legislative Council held a meeting on March 6 to discuss the consultation opinions on the legislation of Article 23 of the Basic Law. The Hong Kong Security Bureau stated that during the 1-month consultation period, it received 13,000 opinions, and 98.6% of the people supported the legislation. However, from the consultation opinions announced so far, the opinions received by the Hong Kong government are diverse and not uniformly supportive of the legislation. News Report 6. Reuters reported that officials from the Pacific island nation of Vanuatu stated that Vanuatu police found 6 Chinese fishing vessels illegally fishing in the Vanuatu Exclusive Economic Zone while patrolling on a U.S. Coast Guard ship and transporting the captured fish to other countries for sale. The Vanuatu Ministry of Fisheries stated that it would issue penalty notices to several Chinese companies and their agents in Vanuatu. This is the first time in recent years that Vanuatu police have seized Chinese ships fishing in its exclusive economic zone. The U.S. Coast Guard patrol vessel line started patrolling in the waters of Vanuatu last week. China is Vanuatu's largest creditor, and China and the U.S. are vying for influence in the Pacific region. News Report 7. The Lutheran Society reported that a spokesperson for the Houthi armed forces in Yemen stated in a televised speech on March 5 that the Houthi armed forces used drones and missiles to attack 2 U.S. Navy destroyers in the Red Sea. The Houthi armed forces emphasized expanding the scope of attacks against all hostile targets. The U.S. Central Command stated that the destroyer USS Carney successfully intercepted an anti-ship missile and 3 attack drones on March 5. However, a few hours later, the Houthis destroyed 3 anti-ship missiles and 3 drones carrying bombs in the controlled area. This incident shows the challenges facing the U.S. Navy in the Red Sea. Despite the repeated strikes by the U.S. and its allies to protect Red Sea ships, the effectiveness has been limited. U.S. Department of Defense officials said that their ability to search for intelligence in Yemen is limited, and even with full-scale searches, they still do not fully understand the situation of the Houthi arsenal. The report pointed out that due to lack of intelligence, the effectiveness of U.S. and British strikes is quite limited. News Report 8. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants on March 5 for 2 senior Russian officers, accusing them of commanding attacks on civilian targets in Ukraine, committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. The 2 senior Russian officers are Commander of the Air Force Long-Range Aviation Kobylash and Commander of the Black Sea Fleet Sokolov. From October 10, 2022, to March 9, 2023, the Russian military launched more than 1,000 missiles and more than 1,000 suicide drones, conducting large-scale airstrikes on Ukraine's power infrastructure, resulting in long-term power outages in Ukrainian cities and inability to supply heating, as well as causing a large number of civilian casualties. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov claimed at the time that the targets of the attacks were the infrastructure that provided combat potential for the Ukrainian armed forces. However, the International Court of Justice believes that even if the infrastructure attacked by Russian missiles is identified as military facilities, the accompanying civilian casualties and losses are clearly excessive, and the 2 senior Russian officers should be responsible for the attacks on Ukraine's power infrastructure and should be responsible for civilian casualties and injuries. U.S. State Department spokesman Miller said the U.S. supports the investigation of Russian atrocities in Ukraine. On March 18 last year, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Russian President Putin and Russian Children's Commissioner Belova, accusing them of war crimes of kidnapping Ukrainian children. News Report 9. United News Network reported that 3 squadrons of the Taiwanese Air Force will conduct night flight training, enhancing the troops' ability to fight at night to meet the requirements of actual combat. Crossing midnight means after 11 p.m. Initially, the training will be conducted once or twice a month, and then gradually expand from the 3 squadrons to all squadrons to implement night flight training together, and the frequency will also increase. The initial aircraft for training include IDF Golden Eagle fighters, F-16V fighters, and Mirage 2000 fighters. Taiwan's Minister of National Defense Chiu Kuiyong said on March 5 that the Taiwanese military will increase the number of live-fire training sessions because the enemy's situation has changed and training needs to be strengthened. In the past, live-fire exercises in the Taiwanese military were only held at specific times each year. In February, there was an incident of Chinese speedboats crossing the line in the waters of Kinmen, and the Chinese government publicly denied the delineated net water area of Kinmen and dispatched Coast Guard ships to conduct regular patrols in the waters of Kinmen. The purpose of these actions by China is to escalate tensions and pressure Taiwan. Therefore, Taiwan is now strengthening its combat readiness with only one purpose, which is to increase the confidence of the Taiwanese people. Basically, this matter is unfavorable for the situation in the Taiwan Strait.